Is that
Hey YouTube family, this is Professor Green coming with another segment of Color of Truth. The continuation of the conversation with my aunt Alzada, and talking about her history transitioning from Savannah to New York City and some of the things that she encountered as it relates to her own personal story. I just believe that we have to capture these stories of our ancestors while they're still here. Oftentimes we get these stories and we try to get the history of individuals when they're gone, and then we have to regroup and try to find out about them. So I just believe in the families now, and as it relates to the family dynamics, that if you're among African or people of African descent, that you need to be able to start capturing these stories now. So, Auntie, I thank you for taking the time to share this information, to share this history, to share your story. You know that I will be able to share with my children's children. And oftentimes, what happens is we try to guess what happened, and then we hear from other people. And I'm quite sure there's so many stories that's been lost. That's been lost because no one took time to sit down with the elders and ask them. It's just always a guess. Or either I don't know. And so let's get into it because I don't want. It's nighttime. It's about 10 o'clock, so I want to make sure that you get your rest. Um, so we talked about Glenville, Georgia. We talked about transitioning to Savannah.
right?
All right, and before I started this segment, we was kind of talking about some of the stuff that was going on in Savannah, and part two, we talked about that you really wasn't exposed to that blacks had their own thing and whites had their own thing, and it was like you knew not to go to
Right. I didn't go
downtown Savannah, the Crest, the Woolworths, all that stuff before the sit-ins and the wait-ins. Black people just didn't go there, and if they did, they knew that they were met with opposition.
Yes.
About not sitting at the counters. And I often talk to people and say, well, some people say, well, you have segregationalists and you had integrationists. Dr. King was more for integration. But we never fully integrated. We desegregated, which there's a differentiation between the two. We never fully integrated, and because white supremacy doesn't share power equally. And there's this whole thing, and maybe in another segment I'll talk about it, not take up time from you. But it's this thing about equality, and I kind of understand people talking about equality, Auntie, but I don't understand it. The reason why I don't understand it is because you would never be equal with another ethnic group, or you would never be equal with white supremacists. And we keep trying to reach this some level of equality instead of setting our own standard,
right,
and letting people come to it.
Right.
But we oftentimes keep trying to reach this level of whatever they call equality to only be met. Like, for instance, what I would say is you went to go sit at lunch counters, but you gave up your own lunch counters to go sit at someone else's lunch counter. The same, the same, to be accepted.
And we always accepted them. We had to accept them.
But you lost what you had.
That's true.
They had an old saying said white man's ice was colder, but it was still ice, and it wasn't colder. And so then you turn around and you had your own stores, but our ancestors left their own stores to go shop in somebody else's stores. You left your own restaurants and juke joints to go sit at Woolworth or Crest or all these different places. So anyway, I don't want to get into that. That'll be for something else. And
then I think it's like the little boy that said, "Have you ever heard of the white water?"
No, I never heard that before.
Well, the little boy, I think it was either it was a movie or I think it was a movie or I read a book about white water. Where the little boy just wanted to taste that white water. Because he called it white water because it's white. white people, and then you had colored people. So he
Right.
called it the white water.
White water.
I can't remember all the details about it, but that's why white water. That's why he called it. And he walked and he was a little boy. I forget how old he was, but he was just determined to get some of that white water.
White water.
White water.
Yeah.
That's what he called it.
That's wow. That's wow. So Savannah, you really didn't experience that much, you know.
No,
So talk a little bit about Savannah. What was the theme? What was it like in Savannah? Besides, I know you say you was amongst your own, amongst other black people. But what were some of the other things that was going on that you did know about? Or what was the theme of Savannah at that time? What was it like in the 40s and the 50s?
That I know I worked in Conta supermarket, and what we did back there was there was one lady who used to cook the turkey. She was black, like I am. She would put that turkey in the oven, and then I can't remember. I don't know if we cut it up or sliced it up and put it out. We used to sell it. We would package the cheese, slice the cheese, package it, and weigh it, put the price on it, and put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the kind of work. But I thought that was a little higher than, working in people's homes. I never wanted to do any domestic work.
Domestic work, yeah.
But as I said, I did for a while. Mm-hmm. I wasn't that good at it anyway.
Yeah, it wasn't for you. And most times black people will always push, even now, in certain job sectors, it was always domestic labor.
Yeah, they call it domestic engineer.
Domestic engineer, yeah, mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
housekeeping, not railroad work, basically housekeeping, cooks. Mm-hmm. It was different levels of domestic.
You iron, you
iron, clothes washing.
Yeah, they put their clothes in a basket, and you get the basket, and you wash Miss Ann's clothes and iron them and fold them up, put them back in the basket, and take them back. Mm-hmm. I saw most of, but I don't know if I knew anybody did that, but I know I saw it in movies. Mm-hmm. But I know people did it because they were taking the wash. People took in washers during that time, mm-hmm. and they would wash for the white people. Mm-hmm. But that was that thing that once I left the farm, I certainly, when I was on the farm, I didn't want to go up there. But at one time, I used to love to go to Miss Ann's house because she had iced tea and cake. Get pound cake. Yeah. And I guess she baked it, and but it was good. I was a kid, and I liked it. Mm-hmm. It was the same as I go to my aunt, and my aunt had cake, and I know her cakes taste better than Miss Ann's cakes. Mm-hmm. But during that time, my mind was mostly on doing better things. Mm-hmm. And so the short time I was in Savannah, I worked at Snow's Laundry also. Mm-hmm. And there I met a cousin. I was working with a cousin, didn't know, a cousin-in-law. Mm-hmm. And then when her husband came to pick her up, and she told about us, and we found out we were all second cousins. Mm. They knew my daddy. Mm. See, and it's really about all I can remember. I think that's the last place I worked was Snow's Laundry. That was the last place. And there I thought I was doing a little higher job because I used to put the tickets on the clothes. Mm-hmm. I was always about getting a little better job. Was it a black-owned cleaners or white-owned cleaners? Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. I can see that lady. I can visualize her now. Mm. Snow's Laundry was on East Broad Street.
East Brown. Okay.
Down not too far from your grandmother's.
Okay. Yeah.
Going toward Duran. Going toward Duran, but not too far from 32nd Street.
Okay.
It could have been 37th, somewhere around in there.
I know it's a big laundromat on like 34th or 35th on the corner.
It's right on the corner.
Yeah, right on the corner. Yeah, 35th, a little bit before you get to 30. So it had to be 35th, because 37th is right up the street. So.
Yeah, in East Broad, right?
In East Broad, yeah.
That was it.
Got the windows around it.
Yeah,
yeah.
Snow's Laundry.
It's still there. The building is still there, but I don't. Yeah, I think they turned into a lumber place, or I know it's a coffee shop right next to it, but I never knew what that was.
Yeah, it was a laundry, and we used to. I think my sister worked in the back, and some of us worked putting the tickets on the clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a little. I felt better doing that, and but then I think from there maybe I moved to New York.
So now it's time to transition to New York. And most people try to escape the South and go up north.
I wanted to leave you.
Yeah, wanted to do that.
Time
Did you hear it was more opportunity in New York, or you just wanted to be the big city, be in the big city?
No, I figured there were more opportunities, and I wanted to escape the South.
You want to escape the South,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And did you hear that from somebody, or did you say that? Did you hear that from people that was in the South saying, "Hey, if you go up north, there's better opportunities"? Did you ever hear that, or you just it was an inclination?
I think it's more of my inclination, because I wanted to. When my ex-husband said he was going to New York, that was just it, because I just wanted to leave the South.
Just wanted to leave the South. And that was the consensus of most people coming from here and moving to the South. But though, I got a book that talk about slavery in New York.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the first commodity, Wall Street,
yes,
was people that
Black
marked
Wall
out.
Street.
Yeah, not Black Wall
Not
Street.
Black Wall Street.
Wall Street. They put up a wall because they would sell enslaved people in that area.
Yeah.
And so that's where they put the wall. So that's why they couldn't call it. Blacks were the first, enslaved people were the first commodities to be sold in the area we now call Wall Street.
Yeah. And then when I went to New York, I had my second child, and I worked in factories, and they just these kind of jobs weren't for me, because I used to work on this Mattel. You ever heard of Mattel toys?
Mattel, yeah.
Well, I worked where they made the Mattel
toys. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and
Mattel is still around.
Yeah, and I used to have to mash this machine pedal, and my leg would swell up.
How many hours?
We did like a day's work, but before getting there to where I worked, the New York Times had listings for light-skinned Negro people.
Oh boy! Now you're getting into the colorism thing.
That was when I was looking for jobs.
When
I was looking for jobs, that would be in the New York Times. It was advertised for light-skinned Negroes.
Yeah.
That's what they asked for.
Yeah.
They didn't want me because I was dark.
You dark, yeah. Anything that was closer to them.
That's true.
And it's still around. That type of colorism is still around.
Have you heard about the paper bag?
The paper bag test?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, paper bag test.
Okay.
And the doll test.
The what?
Oh, the paper bag test is if you had to be the shade, a lighter of the paper bag.
Yeah.
That was what helped you to get jobs or housing, or what was the test for? I never researched it, but I've heard about it.
I really don't know, but they said you had to be lighter than, to get some jobs you had to be lighter than the paper bag.
Brown paper bag.
Some more jobs.
Wow.
Brown paper bag.
Well, I do a segment on that.
I never did, and I need to research that too, because I never did know. I didn't hear about this until I was in New York.
You know.
You know.
Yeah.
And then too, the first place I lived in New York was with my husband's brother and the wife. And I know that I had to do, and I was working in a factory. I worked at Howard Clothes.
Yeah.
And Edith Gourmet's father was Edith Gourmet is a singer, Caucasian singer, but she didn't sing. You don't hear too much about her now singing. But her father worked at, he was the boss in Howard Clothes. And one segment of that, making the pants, and you film the pants where you run the around the bottom of the pants, you know, they call that the machine. It's just it's like zigzag on the inside of your pants, but I can't think of the name of the machine. I'll think of it in a minute. Serger. Serger, you know, you serge around that. You see that those little lines around your pants. That was done on a serger. So I've done a lot of little things, stringing pearls in a factory.
That's interesting.
Yeah. We had to string them and you tie them a certain
Real
way.
freshwater pearls? Or were they imitation?
Oh, I know they were pearls.
Yeah.
We string them and they put that little latch on them. You know. And I never thought about bringing in pearls home. I never thought about that. But, and all the time I'm saying I cannot do this type of work. It's not for me. And I got to do better. I got to do more. But this is very interesting. The project at that time, the projects for low-income people, the grass was so pretty. And to me, it was just like, I guess what reminded me, but most so, Fairwood Home and Yamacraw Village. At that time, those here in the South, those houses were new and they looked good. Because I had been out there, those little shacks, in the country.
Right.
But then, so Carver Village, where we moved, I thought we were, we were doing okay then,
Well, the Carver Village recently was put in the National Archives as the biggest housing development for blacks coming out of the from out of the service in the United States.
Really?
Yeah, and it's supposed to be a national historic, and I do a little bit more research on it. But yeah, and I just learned about that maybe about 4 or 5 years ago.
Village?
Carver Village, yeah, it was one of the biggest housing developments.
There were never even white people living out there.
Yeah, it was for blacks.
When we moved, we all moved out there.
So in New York, the projects were they occupied by whites or blacks? When you moved there?
There were some. I think there was some white, but they were moving out.
Yeah, the white flight
grass,
thing.
You couldn't walk on the grass. Your children walk on the grass, you got a ticket.
What?
Oh yes.
That sounds like Jim Crow South.
Well, it was no. They kept that grass up nice and it was really pretty grass.
Yeah.
And the areas, and that time in New York, if you drop paper on the street, you call a litter bug.
That's where they come from.
Yeah, and it was cleaner than it is now. And they used to have litter baskets around. And then, but to get in there, to see this, it's always something that we have to go through to get into these places. They make you lie. You have to lie to get in these places.
Right.
So I was talking like I was back and forth going to work, and I met friends at the job, and I says, I want to get in the project, and then we all toured around with this. You take the bleach, and you say, you write me from the South, and I take the bleach, and and write my name on it. Take their name off with the bleach off the envelope. You take the bleach off, and then I write my name on it. That's how I got in there.
So hold on.
See, I had okay.
So
had
you
to
removed
be in
it.
New York City so long before you could get into the project.
Oh, okay,
I'm
gotcha.
sorry.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, one way of proving was to have letters from the South. So or somewhere you could have letters from anywhere, but so that's mailing. I received mail 6 months ago. I don't know how long, or 8 months ago. There was stipulation.
Right.
So I would take the bleach and write. Let me see. How does that work now? I'll write. I just remember how it actually went. But I had letters written to me. I can't get it together, but
that's okay.
I had to write. I would take the address off of letters.
Yeah.
And write my name, like somebody mailed me a letter.
Yeah.
And it was, came from maybe a different state. And anybody else had letters, they would give me their letters so I can
get in there.
Yeah. That's the way that's one way I had to prove.
It's almost similar to what we talked about earlier about now even women and black women staying proud, they have to lie, say the man is not there, which causes the deterioration of the family.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because to stay on EBT, to get TANF, to get this and that, you lie saying ain't no man staying with you, or you removing stuff out the closet. If you're in even if in low income apartments.
True.
You know what I'm saying? They come and do an inspection. You they don't want no man in the house. You taking the stuff out because it's supposed to be only for you and the children. Right. You taking the stuff, the person got to take their stuff out, leave, and then come back after the inspection.
After the man.
And illegitimate, in sociology, family, we teach a certain thing called illegitimate opportunity structure and how it's woven throughout the fabric of society.
Oh, yes.
Always opportunity where people are doing criminal acts just to survive. Basically, anything against the law to try to survive. Because at one point in time, Auntie, whites were the users of the what we classify as the projects today. They were housing developments.
Yeah, they lived in there.
They lived there. And we had our own communities.
Yeah.
We had our own community which was sometimes decimated or destroyed.
Yes.
Or the same thing that's going on now, they were gentrified so that the taxes in the property, that's forced migration, right? Voluntarily or involuntarily, most times involuntary because the taxes will go up so high people can't afford that to come in. So it's all kind of ways that they kind of make that happen. But go out and
That's all right. That's quite all right.
Kind of ties into that.
Of course, that was one way of proof that I had been living in New York longer. It may have been a year. Right. It may have been 6 months.
Right.
But even to get into the project. So once I got in there, I think we were paying like I read $55 or $60 a month.
Wow, I wish rent was that much now. Mortgage was that much, $55 or $60. Dang. Well, that was a lot in the 50s. Right?
Yeah. And so got in there, and as I said, it was nice and clean. And other people who lived in apartments, they thought the project was really a nice place to live.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was their community.
Yes, because I remember my husband.
It wasn't a project yet. It wasn't an experiment yet. Till blacks all begin to come in.
That's right.
That's what it turned into an experiment. I say a project, and if anybody want to comment on it, you can come. But I always think of a project. When I think of a project, I think of an experiment. You know, hood is when the neighbors move out. We came from neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But then when you get into a neighborhood and all your neighbors move out and take the resources with them, now the hood is glorified. Well, the hood is a socioeconomically disadvantaged area.
You got a disadvantaged group.
Yeah. So I don't know how we got that described, but that's another question. It's another conversation.
Do you think when you're talking about the hood or the what else we call it?
The ghetto.
The ghetto.
The ghetto, which was the German concentration camps in the slums of Europe.
Oh, that's
it was never ascribed to us. We built our own communities.
Yeah.
Now we glorify. People glorify coming from poverty,
yes.
being in poverty. And most people, and you, I got to say this, and I don't care what people think about it. Most people who say, now you hear a lot of older people, not talking your age group, well, I came from the project and this, that, and other. Yeah, I came from.
Like it's a big thing.
In the 40s and the 50s, that wasn't a project. That was a community.
Community, you're
right. I could come to your house, not like now. Even people live in the suburb, I could come to your house and say, hey, mama, my grandmama could send me anywhere on the east side of Savannah, Hazard County, and I go to anybody doing knock on there and say, my grandma say, send me a couple of eggs.
That's right.
My grandma said, give me a cup of flour.
Yeah.
And it was no problem. Who boy you is? I'm Audie boy. Oh, you Audie grandson? Yeah, you can get it. No problem. Tell your grandma I say hello. Now you can't knock on. Pride has gotten in the way. We don't even knock on each other.
Say, hey.
Tell us, say, hey.
How you do?
So I don't let people that was around in the 40, 51 ran off of that. And Kate Holmes wasn't the same 50 years ago as it is today. But when people say, well, I come from the project, well, what era? Because it wasn't a project then. It was a community.
Yes, but that's what they call it, the project.
I understand.
And then once the project was so nice, you thought that you were moving into what it was like up on the east side, like on from TV. I'm moving on up.
That's right, because you always gonna go up.
Yes.
I was on flat level, but in the north they go up, especially in Manhattan. All them tall buildings that you go across the bridge.
Are like 14 stories.
14 stories.
Now sometimes you have 8, but I used to live on the 8th floor. But sometimes buildings are, and you didn't know how to see any. You see them now, like Weeksville, maybe 2-story. I mean, two levels. Most of them were like 14 stories high. So, and they had elevators. But what I want to say is that it was nice and they paint for you and everything, but then they start taking away the service. And the building, the buildings, all the buildings around the grass, they let kids run across the grass. And you couldn't throw anything out the window years ago. But then they start taking away the service once blacks gets it. All blacks. And then the place get run down. And looking all bad. And then we just seem to just make it look worse. But it's that the real thing is that they took away the service. Yeah,
it's systemic. You take the resources away.
That's true.
And you leave it desolate.
That's true.
And then what are the people supposed to do?
Then you find out.
And then you stereotype them and scapegoat them as the problem.
Right. And another thing you do, the people start painting the walls. Not when I was living in the project, but they paint the walls all different colors in the hallways. And I don't know, they do all kinds of things.
And what was during the 50s? That was the 50s. So what was the climate like in, not weather, but the climate as it relates to people? Was it diverse? Was it a lot of different people? Did blacks stay with blacks? Did whites stay with whites? Italians stay with Italians?
Oh yeah.
So there was still these concentrated pockets, segregated pockets.
But you could, you go in stores and you could visit certain places. It wasn't segregated, but mainly the housing, because you didn't find too many blacks renting from whites or white. And I don't know if I ever know whites rent from blacks. I never found that, but I think maybe today that's the case. Because as I see on Judge Judy and some of the other stores, some of the other judge shows, they do have some white people renting from. But back in the day, back in Seneca, New York, blacks were renting from, whites were renting from blacks because it was a mixed neighborhood and they had their own churches and schools. That's what I read about.
Mm-hmm.
I know nothing about it.
Mm-hmm.
They had their own schools, their own churches, their own graveyards,
Mm-hmm.
their own funeral homes,
Yeah.
you name it.
And I think if I read correctly, and I don't want to be misquoted or get it wrong, it was Seneca Village was more black people because I think it was Seneca Indians that were there.
Oh, really?
Or something like that. Yeah, so it was a black community. That was a black infrastructure right in that area of Seneca, which is now considered Central Park. Am I
Yes,
correct?
that's what it is.
Yes, it's now but it was
Park.
first Seneca Village, and it was a concentration of black people right there who built their own community.
Yes, they own their own communities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
their own churches.
Now
own
it's
school.
Central Park now.
Right, but the city wanted to. Someone came up with this idea of building this beautiful green park.
Mm-hmm.
So then they asked them, they requested them, asked them to move, and that didn't work. So then they made it an ordinance.
And took the land.
Yes, took everything from them. But you had some people from Europe and you had people. I don't know different nationalities that rented from black people during that time.
Yeah.
It was a mixed community.
Yeah.
Because they were renting from blacks.
But see, those are the untold stories, because that's why this is so important, Auntie, because those are the untold stories that should empower African people of African descent, black people, African Americans, whatever we want to call them, but us, that say if that was happening then, it can happen again now. And it should empower to say we come from a people who contributed everything to society.
Right.
You know.
So, and then during that time too, I must tell you that, nephew, that you had very few people from the island at that time.
Which island?
Caribbean.
Oh, Caribbean, yeah.
So, but they had brainwashed those people to think that we were lazy, didn't want to work.
Right.
We were lazy people.
Yeah.
And it was ingrained in them. Yeah. So they just thought that was true until later they found out that, hey, we were. And some of them today we complain so much.
Yeah. And that's still the consensus today to a lot of people from other ethnic groups who are people of color.
Yeah.
They have an idea that blacks from America are lazy.
Yeah.
And I told you about the conversation I had with a guy from India. And when I told him everything that I did, he was like, I didn't believe that. You know, I didn't know that black people work 2 and 3 jobs. And I'm like, most people are not lazy. You know, there's features of society, and there's characteristics of an individual. And the features of society say those things that keep people into poverty, that are structural, that are systemic. It's not that people are lazy. No. You know, most people I know, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, but they are considered the working poor.
That's what they are.
They don't make a livable, sustainable wage.
Because my husband did construction work, but it was difficult for him to get into the union. So he was laid off.
And why was it difficult for him to get into the union?
Because he was black.
Because he was black. And the unions had these rules during that time that they can discriminate.
That's right.
Remember
the Italians had all these construction jobs. Yeah. In New York City, I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So first I went to
who were once, and I'm not to cut you off, but who were once discriminated against themselves.
Oh yeah.
But to increase the numbers of the WASP, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, they accepted white ethics where they one time discriminated against them. the Jews, the Polish,
Yes.
the Irish,
But they seem,
the Italians.
right, but they seem to come together and they all
Now they coming together.
Us. They all together back then too.
Yeah.
You know, they discriminated against them. But then they all turned against us.
Yeah.
That's all I can
Yeah,
say.
we the scapegoats. We become the scapegoats. Every nationality of people say the black people are the problem when we're not. And I don't want to say on this video that black people are the problem. What I'm saying is other nationality, other ethnic groups scapegoat us because they've adopted a European paradigm that say that, hey, if I'm gonna give you a prime example on a micro scale. On a macro scale, discrimination go, but on a micro scale, I was a shift manager in the food and beverage industry.
Okay.
I went to a staffing meeting, family. Now listen to this. I went to a staffing meeting.
Okay.
So these managers, we sit around there with a GM, and I never forget it. He was I don't know what he was, a little Italian guy or whatever he was, but he said the general manager. And so they was complaining about, the manager was complaining about certain thing that was going on. And he simply told them a simple thing. He said, when staff come to you with a problem, make it their problem.
Now, isn't that something?
I'm looking at him like, wow. I was sitting to the table now. He said, I'm going to say it again, and this is going to be the end of this meeting. If staff come to you with a problem, learn to make it their problem.
Isn't that something?
And that's what society has done to the black man.
That's true.
That we have become the problem. The plight. Just like Biden just got up there the other day and said, now the unvaccinated are the problem. Not that it's a germ going around and this and that and the other, and that it was around before the people got vaccinated. But that's a whole nother segment. But now they're the problem. Scapegoat them.
Scapegoat the ones who are not vaccinated.
Who are not vaccinated. Scapegoat them. Let's put it on them. Trump did it too. What did he say? It's the Chinese flu. It's the Chinese virus.
Oh, yes.
Scapegoat the Chinese. They brought it over here. When we have no evidence of where it might have come from. But go ahead, Auntie. I didn't want to. But that ties into what we're talking about. You need some water?
No.
Yeah. You need some water. We're going to take a little station identification break, okay?
Okay.
And I'll get you some water. Yeah, and you two, family, we'll be right back with another part to my conversation with my wonderful auntie, who's full of knowledge and wisdom, and she's imparting that upon us today. And it's the color of truth. The real color of truth. You can't get no truer than this because it's her story. It's not his story, it's her story. We'll be back.